Bulavinaka, Fiji, and welcome to Gold FM Speak Your Mind. And this afternoon, I'm glad to have in studio a guest that is no stranger to the show. Welcome back, the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, Ms. Shamima Ali.
Thank you, and good morning. Good afternoon.
Well, again, Shamima, it's always good to have you, but unfortunately, rather sad circumstances that we do speak again, and this is in light of the incident of the rape case of a 9-year-old last week in Nakasi, just outside Nosori. A lot have been said about the cases, a lot of response from from the Prime Minister himself, and also from yourself. You've spoken out against the incident, but the reality of what the family must be going through and the child. Now, sadly, the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, this is not a strange affair.
Not at all. It is still shocking, as every child rape should be to everyone. We still can't get over it when we hear it. And this was a very public affair, reported, sometimes I think very insensitively. And that, again, has an impact on the family and on the survivor. But yes, and this was a very public criminal act upon a child. But we know that actually this is one of many that happens. A lot of this happens in places where the child has got people, and a child is in familiar surroundings like a school, like the home. A lot of child sexual abuse happens. And our national survey showed that 16% of women were sexually abused as children before the age of 15. No?
16%.
Which is quite high,
Before
the age of 15. And, you know, our statistics at the Crisis Center shows the youngest child that has come to us is about 12 months old, or a year. Then you have 18 months, then you have 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and right down the line. So it's just no child who is exempt from this kind of molestation, and often, unfortunately, and sad to say, by men.
Now, these cases, and I'm sure the Fiji Women's Crisis Center has spent a lot of time with these research. Sadly, with all the awareness that is happening in our country, we're still facing these cases. We still have unreported cases. The month of June alone, there was, in the figures released by the DPP's office, that they were taking to court, in 32 people had been charged out of the total 47 separate incidents of sexual offenses, just for the month of June alone. And even that's a increase from the previous month. But you also mentioned that this is just 10% of the reported cases.
We still believe that definitely reporting has increased. But again, there are many, many cases out there, and unfortunately, those that we never hear about is perpetrated by people the child knows, and a lot of them are relatives. 80% of perpetrators are known to the survivor, and of that 80%, about 50 are very close relatives, related to the, as a relative, uncles, grandfathers, brothers, half-brothers, fathers, let's not forget them, and stepfathers, so people like that who are also involved in all this.
Especially those who, these are people that are supposed to care for the children.
Exactly.
Are supposed to be given roles of responsibilities and are given that particular responsibility to help the child grow.
Yes, our protectors and our providers, so to speak, yeah, and some of these men are such criminals.
What do you think is what we are? Where are we failing as a community? Where do you think we need to step up?
The awareness on child sexual abuse is not as much as we think there is. We do it, the Crisis Center, every training we have child sexual abuse. We talk about child abuse, child protection, but we often talk about physical and so on. We don't touch the hard issues like the sexual abuse, the rape of children.
Why aren't we doing this?
Because it's a bit unpalatable, We don't want to talk about the real issues because then it comes out who does it, and who does it.
But the reality is shown in cases that are being reported.
And we really need to, and schools need to step up. Actually, we are invited in an ad hoc manner to go into schools, because we also talk about children's rights, which is unpalatable to some people. So we often are are not invited nowadays to go into schools, and that is where they should, from kindergarten upwards, for the children, for their own protection, but also teachers. And it should be like mandatory for teachers to undergo this, for anyone who deals with children, caregivers, guardians, parents, and also like in institutions, police, homes, children's homes, all these places, that awareness must be there. We're not doing enough of that.
Is it not that this is the reality that is happening? So therefore, our response should reflect on these cases that are already happening. Is that not the approach that is happening now with all the awareness that is happening in schools and in areas that you've mentioned?
Yes. We look too much at a reaction. When something happens, then we jump up and down, and which is good to make the noise, at that point in time. But then we must carry out the action, and we must also start looking at prevention. And that is where we are missing out. And prevention is about this kind of awareness. It's about children becoming aware, but parents also, adults, becoming aware of what is appropriate behavior with children and what is inappropriate behavior with children. That, and bottom line, Betheli, is men have to change this monstrous behavior. They have to change their behavior. They have to leave children alone and stop molesting them and, really assaulting them in this manner.
With the sad truth about this is our communities, as in cultures that we have in the Pacific and in Fiji, sadly, it continues to perpetuate these types of behavior. And where has the Fiji Women's Crisis Center started in terms of the work and awareness? Have you tried to try at least to work on curbing these incidents from that area in terms of the way we think, the way men in Fiji think?
Yes, definitely. We are working with men. We started this work in 2002 with our Male Advocacy for Women's Human Rights, which is a program that I really encourage men to participate in, and men from all communities and so on, and targeting influential men who then influence other men's behavior. And I think that is the way to go. And young men, what their behavior should be, what is appropriate behavior. And that work needs to be done. We are doing some of that. We have been doing it here, both at national level, provincial, and villages. And recently, in collaboration with the Ministry for Women, we are also working with the men in their zero tolerance communities. These are the Turangani Koros, the police, the priests who are around there. And I'm hoping to see a lot of good coming out of this. And a lot of men would never dream of doing this kind of thing, so they're quite shocked. But once they are aware, then they start, developing ways in which they can, for themselves, making plans into how they can stop this kind of behavior.
We'll be right back. We continue our discussion here with the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center on Gold FM. Speak Your Mind. Welcome back to Gold FM Speak Your Mind. And we've touched on the sad issue recently occurred in Nakasi, just outside Nosori, where a 9-year-old was sadly attacked and is still in hospital. Police continue to investigate, but I'm also here with the Fiji Women's Crisis Center coordinator, Shamima Ali. Just before we went to break, we spoke about efforts by the Fiji Women's Crisis Center in addressing this issue with especially our male counterparts of our different communities, but also looking at these types of cases. A child is involved with a sexual offense or in rape cases. Many of our cases that are in courts drag on for some time. Many of these cases have occurred when the child was a bit younger and still young, and then it carries on throughout their developing years, crucial years. And this obviously has an effect on the victim.
Yes, definitely. We're really glad that the DPP is, quickening the cases and is giving us statistics and things like that. But over the years, and just one recently we saw, which after 5 years ended in court with the acquittal of the alleged rapists. And excuse me. So it does drag on. if a child has been raped at 8 years old and it drags on till 4 years, 5 years, 6 years sometimes, she is by that time 14 years old. She wants to move on with her life. The memory also, dims. She has shut out the trauma because it is very, very traumatic. Often children shut it out. Nasty things you shut out. You don't have to deal with it. So rapists are actually getting away because of the the length of time it takes to bring it to fruition in the courts.
Now, you've touched that. You've touched on the way children deal with certain things that happen in their lives. Shutting out, if it's in the case of rape, some do react that way. And sometimes that is perceived in our cultures, in our community, as a way that the person has healed. Wrongfully so.
Yes, very much so. Because we are seeing women who are coming with domestic violence to the crisis center, that many of these women have suffered from sexual abuse as children also, and they had shut it out. Only because they come for counseling for something else, it triggers off the memory of some other nasty thing that happened in their lives. So they're out of the 16% we're talking about, these are the women who have been abused as before the age of 15. So, that's a coping mechanism, because we actually don't have very effective, countrywide intervention services, actually. So we don't. There are very few people who are doing it, very few organizations that are doing it. So
Fiji Women's Crisis Center being one.
We've been one. And, I really don't want to say who the other people are, because I really don't know about their services. It took us so long. It takes us so long to train a counselor. And particularly in this, only a few, even though we're 30 years old, only a few of our counselors do child sexual abuse cases, because it is a very delicate matter. So there are some which have sprung up and they are doing this work, but I don't know what they are doing, so I really don't want to say it. There is supposed to be a child protection unit within the social welfare department, and that was supposed to have been set up like 15, 20 years ago. And it is there, but those officers also, because we access them, they are deployed to do other things also. It's not, we don't have a specialized mechanism.
And we need that.
Yes, we need that. We need child psychologists. We need child psychologists in this country. And I don't know of anyone who is specialized, who has got that expertise to do that. We send them out to some individuals who are very good at what they do, but we still need the specialized. And it's just in Suva that we can find people. We need to have them everywhere, child specialists in the main districts. We need to have nurses who are appropriately trained, because that's where people go to. All these people can do that work, but we have to have groups that are there, and particularly within government and social welfare department. I just want to add that the education department actually has a program on drugs and substance abuse and violence against young girls here. And we're very much part of that, to training the student leaders to recognize and things like that. But and teachers who are counselors in schools, they counsel for everything. They cannot be expected to do child abuse counseling. We should not be. That's too much for them.
We can't rely on
No, you can't on that. They have to be aware. They have to be trained to be aware, to recognize signs and things. But I don't believe that they should be, neither police. Police also need to be aware, but they cannot carry out counseling.
I was actually going to ask that, because the police also have a certain few officers that are involved with the child protection unit,
Sexual
offenses, sexual offenses unit. And they still need specific, like you said, child psychologists. We still are under-resourced as a country.
Yes. And even the police officers, they need to be trained to be in there. We have trained many, but then they work there for a couple of years and they are moved on to other places. Then the new ones come in, And sometimes, while they are very good police officers, sometimes the demeanor is so bad. We have had to intervene, actually stop an interview of a young girl, or several young girls, whereby it was totally inappropriate. We have a Child Protection Act here in this country, which is not followed a lot of times, So we have to really tighten up around these areas. And if we are showing such shock and horror at what happened to this, in this tragic story in a young girl in Nakasi, then we really have to get our act together. We have to make this a priority, because you have, when these children, the impact, I hope we can talk about impact, it has a lifetime impact on people, impacts on so many things.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how this, as of now, the trauma is fresh on this young girl's life. But
Yeah.
we'll do that immediately after, because we seem to have run out of time again in our segment. So we'll move on and touch on the trauma. And also, if you do have questions and comments, feel free to also call us in the studio, 3220906 and 3220907. We continue our discussion with the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, Sharima Ali, right after this on Gold FM Speak Your Mind. Welcome back to Gold FM Speak Your Mind, and we continue our discussion with the rise in sexual offences, reported sexual offences cases that have come to the attention of the police, and also speaking with the Fiji Women's Crisis Center coordinator, Shamima Ali. Now, before the break, we were going to touch on the impact that these types of incidents occur, or when they happen, and it happens to a young child. We can imagine the trauma. But what exactly are the steps that would happen?
Well, first is the shock, the fear, the horror. This is a child we're talking about. Can you imagine the fear, which is long term, and so on, and then the child, and physically the injuries. So you've got the mental trauma, you've got the injuries that she has to cope with, the pain and all that, and just a sense of bewilderment that adults who are supposed to look after them, they grow up thinking that, and here is an adult attacking her. So that, and the deep sense of betrayal, that is also there, the mistrust of people, and so on. All those things will happen. The trauma she can block out, and so on, later on as time goes on, she will block it out, but she wants to move on with her life. But then there's also the long-term thing of where we have had sexually abused girls who are grown up, what we call adult survivors of child sexual abuse. And they have grown up, and their school is impacted, so their education is impacted. If they don't want to go back to school, they will not want to go back to that area. They will have nightmares, bedwetting. They'll have all these things happening to them. And so it disrupts them. And then when families don't understand, they don't now know how to react, then the trauma will be double for her, because they say, why are you fussing about it? We're over that now. Just go to school and things like that. We have to be very sensitive. So the family also needs counseling as to how to cope with her reactions and so on. So that happens. And then if, and this child will start mistrusting people, and if there's no good intervention and not intervention at the right time, at the appropriate time, this child can be damaged. I don't believe that once this happens, you are damaged forever, that people make this kind of statements. I believe when there is effective interventions, the child can heal later on. And then the long term, and when you have child sexual abuse that is long term, then the child grows up, education gone, employment gone. She thinks that the only way to have love is through sex. So, she becomes promiscuous. She becomes one of those rebellious children. All those things you see, these are some of the characteristics of survivors.
Do you feel that we are, with the awareness programs that the Fiji Women's Crisis Center carry out, is this something that people are taking on, or is it still an area that they would rather not talk about?
No, people are taking it on, because we make sure it's part. And if we go to a village and stay there for 3 days or 4 days, that is part and parcel of that. And we try to bring the 4 things we teach is domestic violence, rape, child sexual abuse, and sexual harassment. So that is part and parcel. And people are taking it on. In fact, we have had incidents where people that we have conducted the workshops with have actually brought children for counseling and their mothers and so on, or pointed us in the direction where it is happening, because they start recognizing, oh, that is what happened. That is what's happening in that house. So they start recognizing. And I had someone, I was talking on radio, and this person rang me. She said, the airport, that some tourists got in and befriended the husband who works there. And the husband, of course, the Fijian style, bring home. And the hospitality and everything else. And she said that he was targeting one of her sons. Every time he'd come in, he'd take that son out and look for him. The first time, the first person he would look for was this person, this child. And then the child, so, it's gradually she started, tweaking why. and take us all to dinner. Why do you want to take him to McDonald's or wherever you're taking the child to? And then she heard this radio program. She said, now that guy's not coming, and this is what he's up to, So people recognize, the more awareness there is, the more people start recognizing. And people have a very good heart where children are, once they know it, they will go out and get, unless, of course, it is someone very near to them. And that is what we have to get away with. Whether it's our husband, whether it's our father, grandfather, it is heartbreaking, but it's a child's life.
How protected are they when they come in, when you have reported cases that involve the perpetrator is a family member? The reality is the child continues to have to socialize with their perpetrator.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, one is, unfortunately, we removed the child from that place where the child, he or she, because boys also get sexually abused by adult men. They are familiar. They don't want to leave their home. And that is what sometimes, if the perpetrator comes from the home, this is what he tells the child, that, you'll be forced to leave the house. So that fear is there. And that's why a lot of children don't talk about what is happening to them. They keep it hidden. So that kind of thing. So I believe that we should remove the perpetrator from the house, like in the domestic violence decree. He gets out. The woman stays in the house with the children, and I think that he needs to get out, and he needs to be told to stay away, find his own place, while the child is kept safe in a comfortable place. We remove the child. And I don't believe, and I'm saying this very openly, I've said it to government, all the governments, not just this government, that we do not have suitable, appropriate places to place children who have been sexually abused. We don't.
Where are they put at this time?
There is Mahaffey Girls' Home. There is St. Christopher's. St. Christopher's has done a good job, but we've also, then from there, where do the children go? Where do the children go, And then we have had cases where a child was sent back to the abusive home a couple of years ago, and she committed suicide, because she went back into the, once they're 17, 18, up till 18, you're a child. And some of them have turned up onto the streets for further exploitation, because they become very, and so that is what we have to prevent. And we have to have specialists in these homes who are working with them, and that is what we don't have. It is government responsibility, it's all our responsibility, because the homes must be a safe haven for them. We are always having children running away from the girls' home. This has gone on for 30 years.
For many years.
Why are they running away? And then we sometimes lump children together, young people together, those who are survivors and those who are there for having committed a crime.
And they are not separated.
No.
And the influence.
Yeah, and we treat them and we punish them. They're all like from out of one prison into another prison. And we have had some horrendous stories coming out of it from one of these homes at least.
Oh.
So we don't have, really places where we can put these children. We have a home coming up, actually. I can talk about it.
All right, we'll carry on right after this short break with the Fiji Women's Crisis Center's coordinator, Shamima Ali, and also with the issue that is, quite on everyone's lips at this time, and that is on sexual offenses in Fiji. Welcome back to Gold FM Speak Your Mind, and we've spoken of the incident, a tragic incident involving a 9-year-old, the recent sexual attack, and we've talked and has raised a lot of opinions from many of the listeners right here on Gold FM and viewers of FBC TV who are calling for harsher penalties. But the reality is we need to also look at the other side, look at the victim and the victims that continue to suffer through all these cases, and increased cases too, as we've also mentioned, and where they end up. Just before the break, we spoke a little about where the children, where young children who are victims of sexual crimes are put if they have to be removed from families. Sadly, unresourced. You mentioned Mahaffey House, and also under-resourced, sadly. We still hear of children running away from the homes. Now, Fiji Women's Crisis Center also looking at trying to build a home for this specific case, for specific cases. Now, how else do we need, or how can we help? What can Fijians do to push government to have proper assistance in these homes?
I think government is carrying out a lot of consultations, and I think people should make public submissions so that it is reported and really urge governments to look after our children, like the government of the day, and talk about the real issues and things like that. I think there is a development plan coming up, already there, and consultations are being held. This matters. This is about our children, and where they end up in the end. A lot of our street kids are survivors of this. So we need to, wherever possible, to talk about these things. And also, protecting children, protecting our children. If you see inappropriate behavior from an adult, sometimes also we have this Vita Valeni kind of thing. And I sometimes see in Tovu and all this, and in the Indian community, we have Indo-Fijian community, we have things like, your sister-in-law, your wife's sister, you can joke. And sometimes the sister-in-laws are young people, like 12, 11-year-old, and it's this adult man, very inappropriate sexual jokes. And, I feel very yucky. The older men, I find, are more into this and, touching the young girls and so on. That's inappropriate behavior. And cultural things also have boundaries, how far you can go and all that. So, we can do that at a very personal level. We can do these things wherever we are. And governments, wherever we are, there is consultations, keep talking to them about it. I saw the police commissioner was having consultations, and very few people attended that. And yet people complain over and over again, about police, so that was your chance. Take advantage of these chances and tell them, these things. Yeah, so, and just talking about children also, the adult survivors, the children who have survived. We have had children who have survived from 7 years to 14 years who were, sexually abused by their uncles and so on. And these are boys also. So we also deal with these people. I've had a 35-year-old man. We have had a 25-year-old man who were abused as children. They're suicidal. They go binge drinking. They can't form.
Are they also being counseled at the Fiji Women's Crisis
Yes,
Center?
we did. Yes. If they come to us, we don't tell them, go away, this is a place for women here. And they can't form good relationships, trustful relationships. Also women, adult women, the relationship between her and her partner is not good. She doesn't understand love and affection. He doesn't either. And how to be with their children. They fear that they might be tempted to do something because they were abused in that way. So we have all these kind of people out there. And some are suicidal. We've got people, we're talking about the impact, and I've just started thinking suicidal. We have had young girls who have cut their wrists, who have cut their thighs, and just to bring attention, this has happened to me and things like that. So, this is why, and these are the adults, very damaged people, who are out there, who never had any help. And this is why it is imperative, it is so urgent and vital that we deal with child sexual abuse.
Now, once again, you've mentioned some of these signs, the important signs. You've mentioned cutting. You've mentioned also the child's academic records could also suffer, and also they could become reclusive also as signs of some of these.
Very much so.
And sadly, we still do not have enough awareness about this.
Yes, we don't, and we don't treat it with the seriousness with which we should be treating it and looking at the ripple effects of child sexual abuse. We're not looking at that. And the home that we have, that I had mentioned, the one that we're supposed to have, which is very kindly, funded by the Australian government as part of our funding, is a home for girls, for young girls who are survivors and who are not left out after 17. There's an exit strategy for them so they can stand on their own 2 feet. And, so education and things like that.
Sadly, that's what you also mentioned, that in these other homes that where they have to, at present, in Mahaffey House, for instance, when they reach a particular age, they have become an adult and are deemed to be an adult and have to be removed from.
Yes.
This again is not very. It's quite detrimental to the development of a victim of such an offence.
Very much so, and we have, as if they are the culprits. They are to blame for something. So we have actually picked up, some of these girls who have come to us, and despite the homes not wanting us in, these girls have ended up with us again. So one is doing very well at the university. One has graduated from the nursing school. So we try to fundraise, and this is for all the people who want to, give some funding for the education of these girls, because that's not provided by our core funding, that we will be looking at you for this kind of thing, because these girls need that. And if boys are part of that also, we are not going to turn them away.
Now that's really important that you say that, because a lot of young men, a lot of young boys who perhaps are viewing this do not have that information available to them, did not know that the Fiji Women's Crisis Center are also able to counsel young men and boys.
Yes, definitely we do.
And the other thing is, well, for the Fiji Women's Crisis Center to be able to be doing this, sadly there isn't enough for also young boys or young men who go through this.
Yes.
And is there any other that you know of that places that can also assist with these victims of these offences?
Yes, there are there is of course social welfare, but I don't know how far they can go. There are other organizations where boys can go to, but I don't know about their services, so I do not want to mention that. But definitely, we have dealt with boys from 1984, from the time of our inception. We don't advertise it, but when boys and children, little boys, we have dealt with two-year-old twins, whose father had molested them and so on. So if they come through our doors, I would advise you to come and seek help. Or also, call us. You can talk to us on the phone if you don't want to be identified, if you're a survivor and need someone to talk to. Because sometimes, young people, they don't understand how they are, why they're acting the way they do,
right,
because they have blocked it all out and things like that. And talks like this actually brings those things back. And if you need to talk, you can always call us, go to our centers. We've got them in Rakirakiba, Nandi, and Lambasa.
Take another short break here on Gold FM Speak Your Mind, and we continue right after this. You're back on Gold FM Speak Your Mind, and we continue our discussion on sexual abuse, especially with children, with the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, Shamima Ali. Now, we've been talking about children. Now, we also look at the child protection services, and we've looked at what services provided by government. How else do you feel? I mean, if with all that we've talked about, and also with the figures that we have at hand on the number of offences that continues to rise here in Fiji, how do you feel that as Fiji, what else with the government services, where else are people able, or what direction do you think we should take at this time?
Yeah, there are so many things that we can do. One, very much at a personal level in our own homes. Definitely looking out for our children, being able to recognize if a child is showing an extraordinary interest in sexual things that they should not be. There is a time when children go through all that and then it passes. You explain to them and things like that. But when it's extraordinary and they start imitating adult sexual behavior, then antenna should go up. Antenna should go up if a child is asking you to touch her or him inappropriately. Yeah, antenna should go up. Where is this child learning all these things from? So those kind of things. And also, teaching children to wash themselves very quickly so that other people don't make the excuse, I was just washing the child's backside or something like that. They are giving him or her a bath and things like that. And who are the people that should be dealing with those things in your house? So do all that. Look at men's behavior around your children, and if you find it's inappropriate, stand up and say no. Teach your child to say no, good touches, bad touches, those things. And that's not just your child, but any child in your community is in danger. One of the things that we're looking at seriously doing, I hope now nobody runs off with this idea and does it inappropriately, is how you have a safe home. So if there's a school in a vicinity and the children are walking home, then they need to be identified, and especially social welfare does that. The background check on those homes, who is in the house at that time, and the community should come forward and say, I can do that, and particularly if there are women. I'm sorry, there are very many good men out there, but because of some of these monsters, we have to be a bit wary. So, who is at the house at that time, so the child can run. If there is a danger she feels or he feels someone is following her, a car is following, the child can run to it. So those houses actually have a sign saying a safe home for children or children, something like that. So we're actually working through that. So the community gets involved, and things like that. But we need to actually get together and everybody, government and non-governmental organizations, Save the Children Fund, and teachers, the education department needs to be in this as to how we can move forward and look at prevention rather than just reacting all the time. And, also one of the things I say is as soon as an organization sets up, we just run to it, because I sometimes believe governments don't want to put resources in these things. So it's very good to give it away to an NGO or something. So people set it up and they're coming in from overseas also, and we're not running proper background checks on them, So don't do that. A lot of people don't like the government agencies don't like working with us because we ask the hard questions. But this is our country. We ask the hard questions. We question police. We question everybody,
We need to.
Yeah, we need to, because we don't. We let institutions continue the way they do, and everything is hunky-dory, but it isn't. Underneath, beneath paradise, there's a huge storm going on, all the time. So I think we need to really honestly come together and be able to take the criticism as well as the plaudits.
The applause and the criticism will have to go
together
hand in hand.
and say, okay, this is the criticism. How do we move forward on this? Not shutting people out and doing that. And I can tell you the Crisis Center has a lot of experience. We're not the best. I'm not saying that we've got everything, but we need to work together. We really need to be serious about this.
How do you feel about the Ministry of Education, sexual education awareness at the schools at this time? If you think that we perhaps a little bit more consultative process should happen, or is it not?
We have been consulted, and some of our material has gone into some of their publications. But I just think that consultation needs to take place with parents in a very realistic way, so the parents don't stop their children from participating and what it is all about. And I think teachers need to be trained to how to openly talk about these things to the children, be comfortable talking about it to the children, so for teachers and so on. And I just think that we need to do that. Parenting, in our workshops and things, community people that we're doing, that we talk about parenting, what is good parenting and how does the community responsibility. So all these things need to take place. And if schools and the communities, particularly in rural areas, come together and, and with some expertise to facilitate, I think we can go a long way.
Well, just before we wrap up the show, is there any final message that you would like to push amongst our listeners and viewers?
Yes, definitely. I would really always, there's a message. But I'd just like to say, look, this is something that is happening widely. It's very prevalent in our country. And you can go, to the police and everywhere else. But if you have nowhere to go, or if it has happened to you and you want to talk about it, or if you are suspicious that it's happening, I think we, through one of the media programs, we had a phone call yesterday. You got your FBC got a call. And so that is really community responsibility, citizens' responsibility. So to call us. And our numbers are here, and I leave this with you, Patheli. And it's like 333-300, that's Suva. And we also have a whole list of mobile numbers from Ba, Lambasa, and Rakiraki, which I shall leave here. I wish I had brought it so I could show it. But you can call us and get the numbers. 24 hours, you can drop call and we will call you back. But please get help. If you know it is happening to any child, you intervene. And if it is happening to you, it has happened to you, you want to talk to someone about it, please give us a call.
Thank you very much for taking the time to come join us on the show.
Can I say something to the men?
Yes, I think you should.
Yes. I'd just like to say to the men that for what has happened this week and what continues to happen, this is a shame on our nation. And remember, you men are bringing this shame to us. Those of you who are acting in this manner, the good human being men that I call out there, please speak out against this and talk to other men, influence, your good behavior, with your good behavior, these other men. And those of you who are even thinking of doing it, please think about what you are doing, that this is not right, it is not humane at all, that animals don't do this, so you can't even be compared, you can't be compared to animals. And this is, you really have to change your mindset, but look out for children rather than harm them in this way.
Thank you very much for joining us on the show this afternoon.
Pleasure.
And again, thank you for joining us on Gold FM Speak Your Mind. And feel free to always send us your comments and questions on goldfm at mbc.com.fj. Yes, it's quite a traumatic a subject that we've spoken on, getting all tongue-tied right after this show. But thank you again, and you have yourselves a good evening, and we hope to have you again on the next show.